We bastards are the products of sin. We are marked with it, our lives deformed by it, our souls best spent atoning for it. Babies like us, we learned quick to trust no one but each other. We looked for the exits and kept our baby suitcases at hand, at the ready. My baby suitcase smelt like me. My suitcase was my home. It had a red plaid thing going, and it was tiny. It was really tiny, no bigger than a vanity case. I liked sitting in it wherever I went, and we went everywhere together. I was very proud of my suitcase, and I would often show it to complete strangers, bus drivers, shop girls, pressmen. It lived under my bed and went everywhere with me. Sometimes it was a little boat, sometimes a tiny aeroplane. You see, I could drag it along the floor. You know, all the babies had them. We were like midget traveling salesmen, and what we were selling was ourselves. Hello, madam. Wouldn't I be a wonderful addition to your household? The incident occurred around that time. And even though there are many things I remember very clearly from those years, I remember nothing but what came afterwards. The bleeding from my bottom. The bleeding, I remember that. That seemed to go on for years. And my adoptive mother, Rosemary Farrell, who would never have accepted anything less than a 100% Irish Catholic baby boy, she always reminded me that I was damaged goods and that I could be sent back to the orphanage because of it. We can always send you back. And I was damaged in what must have seemed an unutterably obscene way. Although I was actually obscene enough on my own, and Rosemary hated that. You see, I used to wiggle on the floor. I told her I was doing it to make myself pee-pee, but she didn't get it. You see, back at the Angel Guardian home, it was really important that you pissed at the right time, because if you were late and you wet the bed, there would be hell to pay. And I was so tired of being punished. So I thought it had shown real ingenuity on my part to figure out a way to make myself pee on cue. And I was actually very proud of this skill. And I would often show it to complete strangers, bus drivers, shop. No, I didn't. It was actually bad enough that I let Rosemary see me. She told me she took a great big knife and she held it flush up against me. And she told me that if she ever caught me playing with myself again, she would cut it off. She didn't catch me. It's still there. And years later, eventually, I went beyond the private little session. It went beyond the tingle. And I experienced my very first orgasm, which was kind of good, but kind of weird. I mean, I was sure that I had broken something, but it didn't stop me from trying it again. Brooklyn boys, we just can't keep our hands off the package. The one good thing about the Farrells was that they rescued me from the foster home I was in. I hated that place. there were two other kids, both naturals, older than me, one of each kind, a boy and a girl. And oh, they tormented me. They were always talking me into doing stuff I shouldn't do, and always laughing and giggling. Like the time they talked me into hiding in the playbox. Oh man, did I get into trouble for that? Or the time I remember they coaxed me into jumping the crib to go sneak downstairs in the kitchen. I was halfway down the stairs, and this car went by on the street, the headlights flooding the place, and then coming to rest right on this picture of Jesus, right next to me on the stairs. And I knew then that everything I had heard about Jesus had to be completely true. I rushed back to the room, more giggling, and I couldn't reach up to get back in the crib. More trouble. You see, the missus there, she was determined that I should drink milk. And I was determined I should not. So I'd be left sitting there in this high chair for hours until I wet myself. Which, to be honest, was something. At least until it turned cold. But then when it was cold and wet, I really let my lungs go then. You see, crying sometimes is the only way to get adults to do what you need them to do. Or maybe to get them to stop whatever else they might be doing. And I was so tired of being punished. I remember that Christmas, the very first Christmas I can remember. I saw the boys on their sleds, and I envied them. That looked so exciting. They were having fun. I didn't get any presents that Christmas. I had not been a good boy. I was glad to be going, and they were glad to get rid of me. You see, babies like us, we never really have a sense of a home, of a place. We just have a sense of falling, forever falling. So I remember the morning they sent me back to the care of the Sisters of Mercy. I remember the little boy who lived next door. He was a natural, but he was all alone. And we were like the same age, so we used to play together every now and then. I don't actually remember his name. But I do remember what happened that morning. He led me into his room, into his house, where I don't think I'd ever been before. It was at the rear. I don't know if he slept there or not, but his toy box was there. And he opened it. And by his gestures and intent, he let me know that I should take something. It was the first time I had ever gotten a gift or a present. And it was a goodbye gift at that, right? Two 3-year-olds saying farewell. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I loved you. I think I love you still, because you were kind to me, and I have not forgot. The morning the Farrells came to collect me from the Angel Guardian home, I remember they said to me that there would be ice cream. I was game. Hey, I was 3.5 years old. It was time to leave the infants behind me. Yeah, baby Frankie was about to become little Jackie. Oh, I remember it was a big deal that afternoon because I was being adopted. I was going into something more permanent. Everybody was really curious, all the kids. And I think I played it like, I'm set to bust this joint. You know how babies are like little drunks? Which they are. Come on, you pass out crying over nothing, and bad coordination. But we were like drunk little gangsters. Because even toddlers know how to make the best of a bad situation. You see, when we memorized things, which is why we have a better memory of those years, because we needed to make maps. We always looked for the exits. We had our own fraternity, our own secret language. We knew who to learn from. You see, the babies like us who grew up within the radius of the baby factories, we learn things differently than most people and with differing skills to grasp. You see, by the time you're 3, you know what a prison is. It's the orphanage. You know, by the time you're 3 or 4, you figured out that the foster homes really aren't all that much better. And by the time you're 5 or 6, you're just resigned to it. You know, it's never going to get any better. This was your lot in life. This was what you were born for. All you needed to do was stay in motion. Check the exits, study all the angles, keep your stuff close, give your trust to no one, and keep your mouth shut. Sure, I was angry. I was hurt. And when I go back there in my memories sometimes, that disappointment sticks. For a long time, my credo was, if you expect yourself to be disappointed you never will be. But that was many years ago. I don't live there anymore. Eventually, I discovered the future, and once that happened, I came to regard my unknown origin as a kind of gift. A blessing, in fact. And so, I arrived in Park Slope, fully clothed and speaking a semi-private language, one late afternoon in February of 1958. 60 years ago. I was 3 and a half. The Farrells, family and friend, they talked to me like you might talk to an animal. As if they didn't think I might just understand them. They were convinced that I had some terrible defect which the Farrells had hidden from them. Why else is he so old? The nuns, they couldn't place him. Maybe my real dad was a psycho, or maybe I had violent seizures or wet the bed every night. I was scrutinized by every pair of eyes, and even the ones who smiled, they wondered. Maybe he killed an infant sibling, or crushed the head of a puppy with a rock. They wondered, what does he smell like? Maybe he smells like a Negro or a Jew. The idea that I was simple-minded was obvious to all of them. The semi-private language we babies spoke at the Angel Guardian home embarrassed the Farrells. They knew people thought me retarded. I mean, maybe just a little, but retarded just the same. This world I had found myself in, all because of my bad blood. It seemed unforgiving. As if it had written me off from the start. And I knew there was something wrong with me. I mean, I felt it from every corner. And I really wanted just to belong. Years later, when Mr. O'Callahan of the Little League and the Knights of Columbus, when he used to put his hand down the front of my trousers to see how my man parts were developing, I was grateful for the attention. And yeah, I mistook it for affection. I remember when I was 6, I discovered that seemingly contradictory sentiments could nonetheless coexist and be equally true. This was thanks to my adoptive mother. You see, Rosemary was a great coupon cutter, a great bargain hunter. So, if she went out and she bought something for $0.25 and it was a piece of crap, she would say, what do you expect for $0.25? But if she bought something for $0.25 and it worked, Then she'd crow, "For a quarter, how could you go wrong?" It was a great relief to me to realize that truth was negotiable. Isn't it a relief to all of us? I don't know how I could have reconciled my faith with my emerging fantasies. You see, the Catholic Church explained everything. Sorrow was my destiny, pain my only friend. When I was 6 or 7, I played house with this little girl from around the corner. Rita Mary was her name. And Rita Mary, she was the Grace Kelly of the 6-year-old set. You know, she was blonde, she was prim, a bit of a goody-goody. And Rosemary always said to me that she was the perfect little lady and that I had to be the perfect little gentleman whenever I was with her. And Rosemary ensured that Rita Mary and I walked back and forth to church every weekend to Mass, dressed in our Easter Sunday best, Rita Mary's gloved hand on my arm. It was only natural that the two of us would start playing house, even calling each other Mommy and Daddy. Rosemary thought it was adorable until she came home one afternoon and found the two of us tucked up together in my bed. She was very unhappy about this. I mean, even though Rita Mary and I, we were completely dressed there under the covers. I mean, there was nothing happening between Rita Mary and I. I mean, we couldn't even imagine, like, hugging or kissing or anything like that. We based ourselves on our own parents, after all. But Rosemary made me promise that I would never get into bed with a girl again until I was married. I thought the matter was settled. But then a few weeks later, she discovered I'd started playing house with this little boy from across the road. And she really hit the roof. And she hit me. You see, there was no pleasing that woman. She and my father, they used to fight all the time. They used to hurl the worst insults at each other. My mother was terrible. And her favorite that she used to throw at my father all the time, she used to say, "You weren't man enough to give me a child." So I spent much of my childhood hiding, hunkered down in a corner somewhere, reading a book, pretending to be invisible. Being invisible is very hard work, but you know it is worth it if it means that people leave you alone. See, those of us who are sinners and others badly born, those of us who depend on the mercy of the church, we have a kind of Stockholm syndrome. I mean, I loved being a Catholic. I still do. Sanctity can look very sexy, especially if you're good in black. I remember when I was 12 or 13, I was the head of the St. Dominic Savio Society, St. Saviour's Parish, Park Slope, Brooklyn. St. Dominic Savio. He was only 14 when he died. And he was the patron saint of teen purity. And boy, was he cute. I was ready to be pure for him anytime. Well, I know it's strange, this mixing of the sanctified with the erotic, but at this stage, it all seemed perfectly natural to me. I remember it was just somewhere around this same time, I made a very, very awkward pass at my best friend, who, unlike Dominic Savio, did not have beautiful curly hair. I don't know what I saw in him, but I made a pass at him, I guess. But what happened was he went and told his mother. And his mother told my mother, who cried. Rosemary cried a lot. Crying was her hobby. Ironing was her other hobby. Crying while ironing. So she insisted that I had to go talk to the parish priest. Yes, sending a 12-year-old boy to go talk to the priest because he might have homosexual tendencies. What could go wrong? Father O'Toole, that was his name, Father O'Toole, quite serious. Percy O'Toole, in fact, he put his hand firmly on my knee and he insisted that it was a phase I was going through. Well, I was quick to agree. And the good father, he smiled, delighted having gotten all that out of the way, and his hand began to inch up my thigh. Oh boy, it was a great relief to know that it was a phase I was going through and not a sin. And it was even more reassuring to realize that Father O'Toole himself was going through the same phase. I loved being a Catholic. The church was my home. I wanted to run away and become a Trappist. Oh, what boy doesn't? Do you know, I wasn't so much indoctrinated by the Catholic Church as I was invented by it. But years later, gradually, it began to occur to me that maybe the Catholic Church was the very illness it claimed to heal. Do you know, the best surprise of my early adolescence was when I discovered that sex could be fun, as opposed to obligatory or, something you had to do, that it could be fun. His name was Tommy. We were both like 12 going on 13. We were on vacation with our parents in this resort in the Catskills. And I remember we wore bathing suits all the time because they were really easy to get in and out of. We used to dare each other. It started as a bit of a goof. But whenever Tommy and I were alone, whether like in a hallway or on the veranda, the top of the driveway, the bushes behind the swimming pool, whichever one of us popped his cock out first, the other one had to lean over and kiss it or lick it or fondle it or do something with it until suddenly someone else is coming along and then we'd snap back to normal right away. See, originally, we had both gravitated toward this other kid, Joey. Now, Joey had this I don't give a fuck attitude that made him really approachable. He was the kind of kid you knew who would do anything for a cigarette or a can of Coke. Oh, I knew that he knew the score, and I wanted to compare notes. I also wanted to see his junk. And I did finally, the morning that he was leaving. God, I'll never forget the leer on his face when he pushed down his swimming trunks to show me. The smirk, it seemed to say, "You like looking at me, don't you?" It was a look I was to see a bit from a number of straight guys over the next few years. Although I admit I learned to do a fair version of it myself. But Joey was lowlife. One of the things I liked about him was that he had no family with him, well, no adults. He was sharing a room in one of the really cheap parts of the main house of the resort with an older brother, slightly older brother, 15, 16 years old, But Rosemary hated seeing the two of us together. Because she figured anybody who was poorer than the Farrells, they were really useless, you know what I mean? It's like hopeless. And I remember Joey, his nails were bitten all the way down, right? And I remember his crotch smelled of really crappy, cheap laundry detergent, but not like he had used it. Do you know the way where you could take clothes, put them in a bag, throw in laundry detergent, and shake them? Okay, that was Joey. Low life. So anyway, I'm there with Joey in his room, and the two of us were taking squeezes of each other, and I'm really excited, and I'm not sure what to do next, but and suddenly Joey cocks his ear toward the door, and he says, "I have to go talk to my brother. Wait here." And he's gone. I began to get nervous. I mean, I knew O'Callaghan, a couple of the brothers, these older guys, they feel me up, they hug me, but they looked out for me. I wasn't sure about Joey. He might just tell his brother, So after 2 or 3 minutes, I decided to cheese it. And as I was running down the corridor toward the side exit, I heard this voice behind me that made me stop dead in my tracks. "Hey, you!" Joey's brother. "You better get over here." He pointed toward the room that I had just run from, holding the door open for me as I went in. "What were you doing with my brother?" Nothing. We were just talking." See, he looked so disgusted with me because I knew my line. It was just so lame. And then suddenly something really unexpected happened. He just popped open the buckle of his wide leather belt and he kicked his trousers to the floor. His thick package was suddenly waving in my face. He wasn't there to protect his brother. He just wanted some of what he thought was going. It was the first time another guy came in my mouth. And I was really lousy at it. I remember we parted wordlessly, quickly, me spitting it out when I hit the flower beds by the path. And I told myself, okay, just be calm, take a deep breath. I decided to go get an ice cream. So I get to the ice cream cart, and there's Tommy. Tommy's standing there. And he says to me, "Have you seen Joey?" And he obviously knew that something had happened with Joey and I, because my answer was real evasive. So he says, "Oh, you must tell me about it later, when we're alone." And with that, he began licking his ice cream cone really provocatively. And then with his other hand, he popped his schlong out from the cutoffs of his jeans, and he started taking a piss right there by the ice cream cart. I was shocked. I was shocked. And I remember he looked at me as if to say, "Do not give me away." I didn't think Tommy and I would get along with each other. He was the kind of kid Rosemary adored. She told me he had breeding. I just thought he was stuck up. When I realized he was shameless, I kind of changed things. I also realized that he was pretty. That another boy could be pretty was like a revelation. I mean, girls were pretty. Boys were meant to be something else. But anyway, Tommy and I, we would dare each other. And this played out over several days, like a stop-action animation or a movie or something, until there was finally an orgasm. Yeah, my second blowjob. It was much better. Enjoying him, it really made a lot of difference. And that was when I discovered that sex could be fun. I remember when I got back to Brooklyn that summer, well, into the autumn, I had my first serious girlfriend. Her name was Teresa Rodriguez. She was so sweet. She and I used to write letters to each other. My feelings for her were genuine, very heartfelt. And I remember we necked a couple of times in the shadow of the church, so it felt like we were almost married. But Rosemary was shocked. "A Puerto Rican?" I told her that Teresa's family had an altar to the Virgin Mary in their apartment. And that seemed to help a bit with Teresa. But nothing helped in the new year when I started high school and I fell head over heels for this really pretty Puerto Rican boy, Ricky Velez. Oh, statues of the Virgin notwithstanding, Rosemary was having none of that. I remember on my 16th birthday, when I turned 16, Ricky bought me a present. A pair of finches and a cage that he had woven. He'd made it all by himself, a little bird cage. And Rosemary, she wouldn't let the birds stay in the house overnight or anything. So Ricky had to take the birds home on his bicycle in the little box he had brought them from the pet store in, because he couldn't put them into the cage, which he'd left with me, and which Rosemary stomped and trampled underfoot the moment Ricky had left. The birds died as well, never surviving the shock of that bicycle ride out to Sunset Park. Ricky must have pedaled so furiously. I was ashamed. And Ricky was humiliated. And it was never the same between the two of us. Never the same. And I was tired of being punished. For a long time, I secretly wanted to be a saint, because I knew I was born already marked for sin. I was groomed for crime. I had criminal instincts, trusting no one, nothing, not even the so-called laws of nature. I tested just how far you could get away with things. The good brothers had taught me early on that sex between two guys always had to be an accident. You see, everybody acted like something else was going on, and then suddenly, bam, boom, ooh, you had to get it out of your system, which was why it was good to have a buddy. I mean, sure, it's a sin to pound yourself, but it's a lesser sin than getting a girl pregnant. But it's still a greater sin than doing it with a buddy. I mean, because guys have to do this, right? We all have to have a squirt every now and then. Brother Andy told me that if you didn't, it would build up inside you. And then you could go blind or worse. Which is funny, right? Because adults are forever telling young guys, their own kids, whatever, that it's if you play with yourself that you'll go blind. When it's the opposite, that's true. You see, the truth is always hidden. Everything's a misdirect. Now, sex is kind of gross. I mean, it's not something you want to brag about. It's not something you want hanging over you. So sometimes you have to do the lesser sin to avoid the bigger sin. Now, jerking off by yourself can be really selfish. So if you're with a friend and you lend a helping hand, well, that's a good deed. Because there's no pleasure. I mean, there's no kissy-girly stuff. I mean, you just do it. It's like taking a crap. And Brother Andy told me the best part. He said, it's actually a good way to do penance. Because it's kind of gross, and there's no pleasure, and you're just doing it to help out a friend. You know, they must have thought I was so stupid. Or maybe they really believed that shit themselves. I mean, I let them believe it because they didn't take so long that way. I was beginning to figure it out. I said, you know, all authority inscribes the code for your obedience into your very skin. And after that, guilt and shame will take care of it. Keep us in our place. Am I right? Oh, guilt and shame. Are there many Catholics here tonight?
Yeah.
Well, I decided I wasn't going to buy any of it. I began to discover the future. You see, because of the fact that I had been a bastard, the stigma that they were talking about, it had begun from birth. Since my soul was darkened by my mother's sin, and salvation so remote to me, I was more an animal than a person. I was a half-breed, kept alive by God's mercy and the utility his consecrated agents could find in me. Since I was evil, no evil could be done to me. I was disposable. I was negligible, a beast to be beaten. And if you raped me, it could not be called rape. Since I'd been born in sin, no crime against me could count as a crime. I love theology. Don't you? They told me that that being abused might even be a way of improving my case in heaven. That I could diminish the tarnish from my mother's sin. Do you know, I know it sounds strange, but for a long time the Catholic Church still remained very compelling to me. This strange, mystical erotomania. It promised a kind of transcendence, a way of rising above the monstrous world. But eventually, even for me, the Catholic Church was to prove just too gay. I remember how excited I was when Stonewall happened, the Stonewall riots, right in my backyard in New York City. I was 14 years old. I thought it was the horniest thing ever. I remember I came out to my classmates in junior year of high school in 1970. And I was smart enough that it threw a fair number of them for a loop. And I had friends in high places, like Brother Alphonsus, who was the head of the guidance department. And once Brother Alphonsus had found one gay boy, he would prod the name of others from him. And soon they would all find themselves summoned to his office for guidance. You see, these guys in the church, they got away with this shit for decades by playing just a couple of very simple rules. 1, use the orphanages. That's what they're there for. 2, if you have to molest kids with parents, at least try to go for the ones who are likely to be queer. 3, if they're queer and they're pretty, they may have a vocation. Time for a retreat. You see, you molest a straight boy, you've got everyone on your back. You're the worst things than Hitler. But queer boys, see, nobody cared. They felt we deserved it. We were begging for it. And what was even better, if you molested a queer boy, the queer boy would never rat on you because they were ashamed enough as it were. Eventually, as I say, I began to discover the future. It started when I was about 12. And I decided that I wanted to be everyone. No longer the sad, myopic bastard happy for any sign of affection. I decided that I would recreate the world inside me. I would ingest it, digest it, shit out what I did not need. The desires of others would be my currency. I would fill the unoccupied brothels of their imaginations, and I would take from them their knowing, without their even knowing. I played the hedonist, but I had no real love of pleasure. You know, pleasure is very hard work. It's exhausting, in fact. No, I played the hedonist as part of an intellectual, a philosophical position. Because after I had rejected my calling into Mother Church, I rejected not only Thomas Aquinas, but all reasoning and logic as well. All I knew for certain was that everything began in the body, that it was only in the body that the true answers could be found, or even true questions conceived. You see, my generation, those of us who came of age at the height of Haight-Ashbury, the anti-war movement and the Summer of Love, we hit puberty believing in all of it. All we wanted was to speed it up faster. And it was all about one critical objective: to reclaim physical, mental, and spiritual control of our own bodies. I was surprised when I had discovered that sex could be fun. I knew that love was never fun. Love was all pain. Love was the kind of nakedness you'd have to be a fool to expose yourself to. So I said that my body would be an empty tablet, and that intimacy would be my education. I studied the people I went home with. I studied their homes, their humors, their accent. I studied the drinks they enjoyed, the recipes they prized. I learned the names of maitre d's and doormen. Some men kill themselves for beauty, to be beautiful or to possess it. I knew I would be neither. So I sought to manufacture mind. I would be smarter. I would see into the dark by a charisma of my own radiant energy. I would learn to live entirely in the future. Love, I told myself, did not exist. And then I met Russell. Earl Hall, the monthly gay dance at Columbia University. And back in the 70s, the monthly gay dance was the best party going. I remember I came in, and this guy Joe, who I knew, he caught my eye, and he whispered, actually he shouted, to be quite honest. He says, he's here, he's looking for you. And there was something in the urgency of Joe's voice that told me that this looking was a kind of finding. And I found myself racing up the curving stairs that led up to the Earl Hall Dome where all the dancing was. And at the same time, no such thing as a coincidence. The young man had begun a descent down those very same steps. We met somewhere north of the middle, and wordlessly, and even though we'd never ever flirted before consciously, our arms just went around each other, and our mouths met too. He told me he was a virgin. I was impressed and charmed and a bit nervous. I mean, a virgin, who even knew such a thing even existed anymore? I mean, I remember that night I got so drunk, I fell asleep on top of him. And in the morning when I woke up, I was so embarrassed, but he just laughed and laughed. And I had that horny, hungover thing going. And so by the end of that first morning, that second day, he was a virgin no more. But it was 1977. There were so many virginities to lose. I mean, 40, 50 years ago, God, priests, of course, never molested kids. Good girls didn't give blowjobs. Good boys didn't ask for them. I remember when I was a kid, desire was something you had to hunt for. The search was nearly everything. I remember looking into so many pairs of older eyes and wondering, are you the one? Russell was a bad boy. I knew that's why we belonged together. I guess he knew it too. Years later, when they lied to me about the little memorial service they had for him up at Columbia, our friend, who was not yet then a world-famous playwright or screenwriter, he said to me, it was bad enough he was murdered. His mother didn't have to know that he was also homosexual. And I thought, what a pity none of you bothered to ask me, because I could have told you that Russell's mother was a lesbian living with her girlfriend in Florida. I remember the time Russell called me once from a coin box at Columbia, and there used to be banks of them. Calls was still a dime. This is a long time ago. And he was really cryptic and really urgent. And he just says to me, he says, meet me front car of the one train coming into the 96th Street station. He had stolen a guy's wallet. Some guy he had cruised in a men's room up at Teachers College. And he was breathless. And he was glorious. And he felt like he'd really made it. He was so excited. The two of us kissed a lot. I mean, I admired him. I'd never been that bold. I didn't even know about this toilet at Teachers College, despite the fact that it was very popular. And 40, 50 years ago, public restrooms were very busy thoroughfares where perverts, gay men, could meet. 40, 50 years ago, to be gay was to be a criminal. Being a bastard, I had always lived beyond the front porch comforts. I'd always been regarded with suspicious eyes. I knew what it was to have survival instincts intact, to trust no one, to know nothing was secure, that nobody ever said what they really meant or were who they really pretended to be. That is the feral. That is the criminal. You see, crime is not a derangement. What's really scary is just how natural it is when all the rest has been denied. Russell had that speed and that hunger. I pride myself on remembering, but the curse lurks in remembering wrong. I got the phone call Monday morning from my friend Nancy. At work, I was at work in Soho, and then the coppers pulled up and I was off to the station house for an afternoon of questioning. The bad boy reputation I had built for myself since coming to Columbia. And before I got to Columbia, I was a goody two-shoes. I was going to be a priest. But I wanted to be like a bad boy reputation. And it came back to bite me because friends that we had nightclubbing in late night New York, they gossiped. And they spread the rumor that I had been Russell's killer. And the thing is that in a funny way, I did feel responsible somehow. I felt I should have protected him. That I should never have let go of him. That I should have loved him more. Years later, I wrote a poem for him, which was actually something I had stopped doing. Well, there's a story about everything. But once upon a time, this professor at Columbia, he took an interest in my poetry. And he invited me to come to his pied-à-terre off Fifth Avenue, just east of the Metropolitan Museum. This was a very classy setup. It was an adventure I was enjoying. And I remember I had my old school unlined notebook, with lots of stuff in it, paragraphs, poems and stuff, a year and a half of it. And I got to his place, and it was a really tiny elevator, like nothing I'd ever seen before. One person, you couldn't fit more than one person in. Went up, opened right up into his apartment. And he fed me drink, Jack Daniels, as I remember. And he had me read some of my poems out loud to him. He was very enthused. He told me I had a unique voice. I was elated. And then he put his hand on me, and he put it there in that way. And I just so did not want it to end in sex. I was 20 years old, and I was really getting tired of getting hit on all the time. You know, it never occurred to me that he might have found me hot because he actually liked my poems. I just thought that he was bullshitting me, that I'd been set up. So I remember when I left, I took the notebook and I tossed it into a bin just south of the Metropolitan Museum. And I swore I would never again write a poem. Until this. For Russell, on the 30th anniversary of your murder. As a child, I learned the names of birds I remember to this day. Blue jay, crow, whippoorwill. Their calls mattered. The morning song, the flight, the span, the shadow. Every night my childhood bed would lift, go wide and fly. I had impossible dreams about me. I live near water, and birds will come and go, and I am happy to hear their calls. The day begins. We have survived. I have your secrets. I know your smell. I have never stopped seeing your face. How is it possible you are so long gone? The plump ringed dove, the narrow-nested swift, the crested ones, both blue and red, their voices, they are known to me. I hear them and know they sing long after we are left. I no longer remember the sound of your voice, nor any word you might have mentioned. But I do remember this. The underwear, the silly pants, the short, silent gestures, gnomic and naughty, the endless rotations we made of our room, our own private nightclub without bouncers. I hope that death is a kind of flying, that it's just a different view. I will preen when daylight comes and voice a full-throated song all my own. I will wonder if you'd hear me, or if maybe I'd hear you. I loved you once, and you loved me. There is too much enoughness within that. The empty sky, the silhouette, the rush of wings. Fly on, and in time, I will follow. You see, he was in love with me, and it scared the shit out of me, because it all felt really new, and it was kind of new. Okay, I'll tell you more about Russell. Russell played the trombone in his high school marching band, but I did not hold that against him. In fact, I thought it was kind of sweet. I always had a thing for musicians, so even before I met Russell, I'd been with cello player 2, violin twice, piano, Jesus, who can count, flautist 2. Oh yeah, and once a professional whistler, right? Now the whistler, he was a guy I had also met at an Earl Hall dance, albeit a year and a half before I had met Russell. Somehow the two of us ended up at the Chelsea Hotel, which, as you do, and I remember that before and after the sex, he demonstrated his unique talent. First with the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which was very stirring. And afterwards, as I was rolling a joint, with the Tara theme from Gone with the Wind. I was very impressed, which is a kind way of saying that 40 plus years on, it's the whistling and not the sex that I remember. You know, Russell and I, we used to play a game, Russell and I. around one or another Upper West Side blocks where I would go one direction, he would go the other, and I keep turning right, he'd keep turning left. And then we'd finally approach each other from opposite directions, and we'd pretend we didn't know each other. And then we would just start cruising the fuck out of each other. It was so hot. It was so sexy. You see, Russell and I, we moved in together faster than a pair of lesbians with a U-Haul van. If you get that joke, not everyone knows it. It's a removal thing. And that was a joke back then, 40 years ago. The joke was, what does a lesbian bring on the second date? The U-Haul van. And but wait, there was a game. There was one for gay men too, and that one was okay. What does a gay man bring on the second date?
Second date.
A second date, exactly. What's that? What's a second date? Let me go on Google. Is there such a thing? So anyway, when I met Russell, I felt I had nothing to lose. I had no birthright, no heritage, no bloodline hanging over me. I had explored and I found friends on the wild side. I wanted to experience everything, every sensation. Rimbaud was my hero, and the manic world of exhibitionist theatricals my milieu. I was experimental. I was avant-garde. I directed edgy stagings of the classics with contemporary incoherence lathered in generously. I had club names, and I took acid whenever possible. My favorite club name was Guido, not like in a Jersey Shore jokey kind of way, but inspired by Mastroianni in Fellini's 8½. So if I was in a club and a friend came up to me and they said, Guido, put me in your picture, that was a cue to go off somewhere and smoke a joint. Russell told me that I looked like James Osterberg on the cover of an album he had just released. And I was very flattered, but I don't think I ever really looked like Iggy Pop. Although Lust for Life is a really great album. And I remember Sam was Columbia's resident psychic. I'd never met him, but I heard him extolled. And he had words for Russell as well. He had read Russell's palm. He had breathed in the luminescent moisture of his aura. And he told Russell that he was to have but one great love in his life. And Russell was convinced that I was that great love. What a fucking responsibility. I mean, it scared the shit out of me, and I rejected the title. And I told Russell he was too young to be buying into all that shit. So I didn't know. How could I know that death would fulfill Sam's prophecy? That death would make it true. I will tell you this about death. It changes everything, but not the everything you think it will change. It is not just a loved one who vanishes. Your insides empty out, and for a time, you vanish as well. I realized then that the identity I had invented for myself, that I had shaped and grabbed, that was the luxury. And the love affair was the necessity. Even years after having broken free of the identity that had once defined me and struggling to find a newfound freedom, a struggle all of us make, I had to wonder, was it just a luxury? A narcissistic delusion so we could all devote more time to the enigma we like to call ourselves. Sad truth number one. I suspect the more we journey into ourselves, the more we may discover that there is actually very little there. I once wanted everything, but everything isn't really very much. We have atomized ourselves into a singularity of conformity, lost in the foamy pool of self-realization, forgetting that the self can only be realized in relation to others. We are not the sum of our affectations, but of our affections. The body is not a metaphor. Biology is not symbolic. Who we are will always surprise the person we think we are. And what begins in memory ends in prophecy. I fear we are coming to a place when we will no longer have real things, but we will know their image and scale in the virtual world, and that will compensate. Hell, who needs real things? Perhaps we will soon never make love. We will only watch it, and probably a lot. I fear that soon the meaning of numbers will become strange, too large to hold or comprehend. That space will become a source of stress, not too little of it, but too much. That crowds will come to always carry threat. That we will only feel safe when we are alone behind locked doors and before a glowing screen. My world is not your world. Your life is not my life. But somewhere in between there is something there. I think it is the thing I have spent my whole life searching for. We are the creature whose meaning is in our assertion of meaning. The meaning of life is not a noun. It is a verb. The meaning of life is not a thing. It is an action. Of that I am now certain. Thank you all very much. Thank you all. Thank you for coming this evening. There are other shows happening. 9 o'clock here tonight. Franny is doing her show Smashes Again, which is a hoot. It's really funny. And next week there's a very full program. And I know everyone is dying to get to the Eurovision. So we're going to not have that conversation about child abuse. I know you all came with problems. Fuck it. We all want to go see Ireland win. No, yes. I'm joking. I am joking. That was very crude of me. Thank you all for thank you very much.